Most people think that being overly friendly is just a personality trait. It's often labeled as being nice, kind-hearted, or social, but in truth, consistent over-friendliness, especially when it comes at the cost of your boundaries or well-being, is usually a deep-rooted nervous system adaptation. It's not just who you are, it's what your nervous system learned to do to stay safe in the world. The human nervous system has evolved over thousands of years to respond to threats in four main ways: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawning is a behavioral response to fear or danger in which an individual attempts to please, appease, or accommodate others in order to avoid conflict or rejection. This is where chronic over-friendliness often originates. If at some point in your life, especially in early development, you learned that being agreeable, overly helpful, or excessively kind helped you avoid punishment, gain approval, or feel safe in unpredictable environments, then your brain started wiring that behavior in as a default setting. Your autonomic nervous system doesn't wait for your conscious mind to decide whether someone is trustworthy or if you're being taken advantage of. It reads cues of safety and danger rapidly, often subconsciously, through facial expressions, tone of voice, posture, and body language. This is part of what neuroscientists refer to as neuroception, the body's ability to detect safety or threat without involving the thinking brain. If your neuroception system learned early on that being friendly was the fastest route to safety or connection, it will keep driving that behavior pattern forward, even if it's no longer serving you. Over time, this can lead to a disconnect between what you truly feel and what you express. You might find yourself smiling when you're uncomfortable, agreeing when you want to say no, offering help when you feel exhausted, or engaging in social interactions that leave you feeling drained or resentful. These actions may appear generous on the surface, but they often come from a place of self-protection rather than genuine desire to connect. And because this pattern becomes so ingrained, many people struggle to even recognize when it's happening. At the level of the brain, this behavior becomes encoded in specific circuits, primarily in the prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and brainstem. Repeated experiences of needing to please in order to stay safe strengthen synaptic connections in these regions. The amygdala, which processes emotional threat, often becomes hypersensitive. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which helps modulate fear responses and social behavior, may be overactivated in social situations. In other words, your brain is not malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it learned to do to keep you safe based on past input. But here's what's critical. Once you become aware of this as a pattern, you can start working to change it. This shift in perspective, seeing over-friendliness not as a fixed personality trait, but as a nervous system response, opens the door to change. You're not locked into being overly nice. You're simply following a path that your biology believes is safe. That path can be rewired with conscious effort and the right tools. Understanding that these behaviors are biologically driven helps remove shame and blame. There's no weakness in being nice, but there can be vulnerability in allowing your nervous system to be hijacked by outdated threat responses. This is why it's essential to build body awareness by tuning into physical signals. Tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, tension in the jaw or neck. You can begin to intercept these unconscious patterns in real time. The nervous system speaks through the body, and when you learn to listen, you gain the power to respond rather than react. Being overly friendly is often an intelligent, adaptive response that simply outlives its usefulness. It might have kept you emotionally safe in one chapter of life, but in the present, it may be costing you clarity, energy, and even self-respect. By understanding this pattern from a neurobiological lens, you can begin to intervene at the source and build new pathways for regulated, grounded, and intentional social behavior. The dopamine system plays a crucial role in how we pursue goals, how we stay motivated, and how we assess reward and effort. But what many people don't realize is that dopamine isn't just released in response to achievement or progress. It can also be triggered by social validation, things like praise, likes on social media, a smile of approval, or even just being accepted in a group. When you're overly friendly and agreeable in hopes of being liked, you're often being driven by a reward-seeking mechanism in your brain. This isn't a moral decision, it's a neurological pattern. The dopaminergic system is designed to detect cues that signal potential reward. For many, especially those with a history of needing to gain approval to feel safe or valued, the brain has learned to interpret social approval as one of the most powerful and reliable sources of dopamine. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. You act in ways that prioritize being liked, your brain rewards you with dopamine, and the cycle reinforces itself. This is why people often find it hard to stop being too friendly, even when it drains them or goes against their best interests. Dopamine is not just about pleasure. It's about motivation and drive. When your dopamine system is overly tuned to social validation, it can mislead your motivational focus. Instead of pursuing your personal goals, deep work, or long-term vision, your brain may keep redirecting you toward short-term hits of approval. It subtly shifts your attention from what's meaningful to what's socially rewarding in the moment. Over time, this can erode your ability to stay locked into deep, focused states of effort, because part of your brain is constantly scanning for cues of whether others approve of what you're doing. The problem is, this type of dopamine-driven behavior is often in direct conflict with long-term success. Real growth and transformation require periods of discomfort, disapproval, or even temporary isolation. If your brain has learned to equate disapproval with a dopamine deficit, it will begin avoiding the exact situations that lead to transformation. You'll say yes when you should say no. You'll agree to things that take you away from your goals. You'll maintain surface-level friendliness in situations that demand honesty, boundary setting, or assertiveness, all because your brain is chasing the next little dopamine hit through someone else's smile or validation. What makes this even more challenging is the way dopamine affects perception. It changes what we find appealing, what we want to repeat, and how we evaluate risk and reward. So when your dopamine system is wired to reward friendliness or people-pleasing, you're not just following a habit, you're also misjudging situations. You may overestimate the value of being liked and underestimate the cost of abandoning your own needs. You might believe you're making smart choices when in reality, you're simply reacting to an internal chemistry that favors short-term social gain over long-term fulfillment. Understanding the neurobiology of dopamine allows you to take control of this process. If you know that your friendliness is being reinforced by a reward circuit that may not have your goals in mind, you can begin to work against it intentionally. This involves exposing yourself to small doses of discomfort, saying no, risking being misunderstood, choosing not to explain yourself when unnecessary, and observing how your system reacts. These moments of internal resistance are actually opportunities to retrain your dopamine system. You are teaching your brain that validation doesn't have to be the primary currency of reward. Another crucial part of this process is setting up internal sources of dopamine. Journaling, progress, celebrating small wins, tracking your effort instead of outcome. These all rewire the brain to find reward in self-generated signals rather than external approval. Over time, this builds autonomy within your motivational circuitry. Your drive becomes aligned with your values, not just with how others see you. Without awareness of this mechanism, you might continue to chase social approval, not realizing that your dopamine system is operating on outdated rules that don't match your current aspirations or identity. This creates friction between who you want to be and how your brain is driving behavior underneath the surface. The more often you choose alignment over approval, the more you allow your dopamine system to evolve into a tool for self-respect and deliberate action rather than a trap of constant friendliness. The ability to set and maintain clear social boundaries is not just a personality skill, it is a cognitive function supported by specific brain circuits. When a person is overly friendly or excessively agreeable, it can begin to interfere with the brain's ability to perform optimally, particularly in areas responsible for focus, decision-making, emotional regulation, and stress resilience. The illusion of kindness, when chronically unbalanced, leads to neurological consequences that erode your mental clarity and cognitive bandwidth. The prefrontal cortex, which governs executive functions like planning, prioritization, and self-regulation, is especially sensitive to social demands. When you are always trying to manage how others perceive you, constantly adapting your behavior to be liked, or overextending your energy to avoid disappointing people, you place an enormous load on this system. It becomes engaged in tasks it was never meant to prioritize, like people-pleasing, rehearsing social interactions, overanalyzing conversations, or managing emotional discomfort through appeasement rather than resolution. This creates what neuroscientists call cognitive load, and it reduces the available bandwidth for critical thinking and high-quality decision-making. When you're caught in a pattern of over-friendliness, your brain is also expending effort on something called mental filtering. the subconscious process of monitoring other people's responses, tone, expressions, and nonverbal cues to adjust your behavior accordingly. While this is normal in occasional social settings, when done chronically, it becomes a background process that drains your mental energy. The anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, which monitors conflict and error detection, becomes more active, flagging internal discomfort anytime you perceive a risk of social disapproval. This increases stress and often leads to behavioral inhibition, where you suppress your real opinions, desires, or needs in favor of social harmony. Over time, this becomes automatic, and your true identity becomes suppressed by the nervous system's need for social coherence. The more you engage in this adaptive over-friendliness, the more blurry your boundaries become. You may start to say yes to things that don't serve you, tolerate behavior that disrespects your values, and make decisions that prioritize keeping the peace rather than speaking your truth. From a neurological standpoint, this dissonance between internal values and external behavior creates what's known as limbic friction, a mismatch between the emotional brain. This friction can manifest as anxiety, fatigue, brain fog, irritability, and eventually burnout. It's not a lack of willpower. It's a neurological system in conflict with itself. Boundaries are essential because they act as filters that protect your time, energy, and attention. They help the brain conserve resources by creating clarity about what's yours to manage and what isn't. Without clear boundaries, the brain is forced to make thousands of micro adjustments in social settings, evaluating tone, choosing soft language, suppressing authentic thoughts, managing emotional reactions, all while trying to maintain a performance of being likable. This drains dopamine and depletes prefrontal cortex functioning, which are both critical for long-term goal pursuit and emotional regulation. In addition, over-friendliness can suppress the activity of your default mode network, the DMN, a system involved in self-reflection, internal narrative, and strategic thinking. When your focus is continually outward toward others' needs, preferences, and feelings, you begin to lose contact with your internal reference points. You stop checking in with yourself. You ignore internal signals that say, this doesn't feel right, or this is too much, and instead rely on external feedback to determine your worth or direction. This creates a chronic external orientation of the brain that stunts self-development and blunts personal insight. From a physiological perspective, this dynamic also activates the sympathetic nervous system, keeping your body in a low-grade state of stress as it prepares to manage social threat, even if that threat is subtle or imagined. You may find it harder to focus, recover from effort, or enter deep rest because your system is constantly monitoring for rejection or disconnection. The long-term effects include disrupted sleep, lowered immune function, increased inflammation, and emotional dysregulation. The solution begins by recognizing that boundaries are not barriers to connection. They are regulators of mental energy and protectors of neurological efficiency. When you are too friendly, too often, without discernment or boundaries, you are placing your brain in a constant tug of war between authenticity and acceptance, between internal alignment and external performance, between self-leadership and social compliance. Leadership and social influence are not built on being liked by everyone. They are grounded in clarity, consistency, and the ability to regulate emotional expression with intention. While warmth plays an important role in human connection, the kind of warmth that earns trust and authority is not the same as excessive friendliness. Controlled warmth is based on intentional behavior, whereas excessive niceness is often reactive, driven by an unconscious desire to avoid discomfort or rejection. Understanding the neuroscience behind how people perceive authority and respect reveals why over-friendliness often backfires in both professional and personal domains. Humans are biologically wired to seek leaders who are both competent and emotionally regulated. From a brain-based perspective, we assess leadership potential through two primary dimensions: warmth and strength. Warmth helps signal that a person is safe, trustworthy, and cooperative. Strength communicates competence, boundaries, and the ability to take action under pressure. Overly nice behavior often attempts to maximize warmth, but at the cost of signaling diminished strength. This creates confusion in social hierarchies, leading to reduced respect, blurred power dynamics, and missed leadership opportunities. Controlled warmth, by contrast, activates the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center responsible for rational thinking, social intelligence, and impulse control. A leader or individual who maintains calm, measured expressions of warmth while remaining grounded in self-respect signals safety and confidence. This balance communicates to others that their behavior is intentional, not reactive. It shows that emotional regulation is intact, which neurologically translates to trustworthiness. When someone is excessively nice, especially in tense or important moments, it often triggers subconscious doubt in observers. The behavior can be interpreted as insecurity, a fear of conflict, or an inability to navigate complex situations, all of which reduce perceived leadership strength. Social hierarchies, whether in evolutionary biology or modern organizations, rely on individuals who can maintain composure under stress. Neuroscience studies on group behavior show that people naturally gravitate toward individuals who are consistent in their emotional tone. Inconsistency, such as being overly friendly in inappropriate context, creates social noise that the brain interprets as unpredictability. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes more active in response to this inconsistency, leading people to feel subtly less safe around those who are too accommodating or performatively nice. This is especially true in high-stakes environments where decisiveness and authenticity matter more than likability. Additionally, individuals who overuse friendliness often suppress authentic signals in their facial expressions, body language, and voice tone. This can activate what researchers call incongruence detection in social cognition networks. The listener's brain detects a mismatch between verbal and nonverbal cues, which reduces trust. A flat smile, overly agreeable words, or nervous laughter in response to serious matters are all picked up by the mirror neuron system and create subtle tension. Even if people can't consciously articulate it, they register the dissonance and are less likely to follow or respect the person displaying it. Leadership, by contrast, depends on emotional congruence, the alignment between internal emotion and external behavior. Controlled warmth demonstrates this alignment. It reflects someone who knows when to be kind, when to be firm, and when to step back. It's about selective expression, not universal approval. From a neurobiological view, this also allows the default mode network responsible for self-awareness and long-term vision to function effectively. A person who is overly focused on pleasing others loses access to this system, becoming stuck in short-term interactions at the cost of deeper leadership insight. Controlled warmth also plays a critical role in social prediction, which is how people's brains anticipate your future behavior based on past experiences. If you are overly nice and inconsistent with boundaries, others will have a hard time predicting your responses, which increases social uncertainty. The brain avoids uncertainty and prefers reliable patterns. When you display regulated warmth alongside firmness, others develop a predictive model of your behavior. They know you are fair, respectful, and principled, but not easily swayed or manipulated. The ability to regulate warmth and assertiveness in real time depends on a well-developed insula and anterior cingulate cortex, which are brain regions involved in emotional awareness and conflict monitoring. Practicing stillness before speaking, deliberate breath work during stress, and giving yourself permission to delay emotional reactions all enhance these brain systems. This gives you access to leadership presence, the neurological state where you are both emotionally available and cognitively clear, both open and self-directed, both empathetic and unshakable. The human brain is not static. It is constantly changing, adapting, and reshaping itself in response to behavior, environment, focus, and intention. This quality, known as neuroplasticity, is what allows people to modify deep-rooted habits, behaviors, and even personality traits. Over-friendliness or the chronic need to be liked and approved of is not a fixed identity. It is a pattern encoded through repeated experiences, and like any pattern, it can be rewired with conscious effort, physiological strategies, and sustained practice. The nice person reflex is the result of learned associations between friendliness and safety, and changing it requires both awareness and deliberate neurological reconditioning. Neuroplasticity operates on a basic principle: neurons that fire together wire together. This means that every time you respond to discomfort or social tension with niceness instead of authenticity, you reinforce a circuit. Each instance strengthens the belief at a neural level that friendliness is the safest or most effective way to handle social complexity. These circuits often begin forming in early environments, such as households where conflict was dangerous, schools where compliance was rewarded, or cultures that overvalued agreeability. The more this pattern is repeated, the more automatic it becomes. The behavior begins to live in the brainstem and limbic areas below conscious awareness as a default setting for how to interact with the world. To rewire the pattern, it's not enough to tell yourself to stop being so nice. The nervous system doesn't respond to abstract logic, it responds to direct experience, repeated over time, especially when that experience involves tolerable doses of emotional discomfort. Neuroplasticity thrives under conditions of attention, repetition, novelty, and emotional intensity. That's why meaningful change doesn't just come from reading or thinking. It comes from acting differently and teaching the brain through lived experience that new responses are safe and beneficial. One of the most effective tools for rewiring the over-friendliness reflex is behavioral exposure, the practice of placing yourself in small, structured situations where you resist the urge to appease and instead choose alignment with your inner values. For example, saying no when you're used to saying yes, allowing silence in conversations where you'd normally fill the gap with reassurance, or not softening your tone when delivering direct feedback. These may seem like small acts, but neurologically, they are significant. Each one challenges a well-worn neural pathway and introduces the brain to a new, unfamiliar, and eventually empowering route. Breathwork and interoceptive training, becoming more aware of internal bodily signals, are also crucial in this process. The insula, a region of the brain involved in self-awareness and emotional state tracking, becomes more active when you practice tuning into your body. When you begin to feel the early signs of the nice person reflex, tightness in the chest, shallow breath, a compulsion to smile or agree, you can intervene at the somatic level. Techniques like slow nasal breathing, lengthening the exhale, or grounding your attention in physical sensations can downregulate sympathetic arousal and create the internal space needed to respond, not react. Journaling is another powerful neuroplasticity tool because it activates the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reflection, analysis, and forward planning. By reflecting on social interactions, identifying triggers for over-friendliness, and tracking moments where you successfully broke the pattern, you create metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. This strengthens new neural pathways related to self-direction and cognitive control. Over time, journaling builds pattern recognition, helping you spot and redirect behaviors before they fully engage. Visualization also plays a key role in rewiring. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagined and real experiences when it comes to building pathways. Visualizing yourself setting boundaries, expressing yourself assertively, and staying calm under social pressure activates the same circuits that would be used in real time. This kind of mental rehearsal primes your nervous system for change, making it more likely you'll act differently when the moment comes. Another essential ingredient is deliberate discomfort, the conscious choice to stay in emotionally difficult situations rather than escaping them with friendliness. Discomfort creates the biological conditions for neuroplasticity, especially when it is paired with attention and intention. In these moments, the anterior cingulate cortex and prefrontal cortex work together to encode new responses. You are not just learning behaviorally, you are physically remapping your brain. Because the nice person reflex was originally encoded in moments of fear, shame, or confusion, undoing it requires facing those same feelings in manageable doses, while providing yourself with new internal outcomes like stability, agency, and clarity. Human physiology is designed around a balance between activation and recovery. Just as muscles grow through cycles of effort and rest, the brain and nervous system require periods of energy expenditure followed by deliberate restoration. When you're overly friendly, constantly available, or habitually putting others' needs ahead of your own, you may not realize that you're continuously activating systems in your body that were never meant to be switched on all the time. What may seem like simple acts of kindness or generosity are often interpreted by your biology as performance, and performance consumes resources. Over time, this leads to emotional depletion, cognitive fatigue, and physiological stress that erodes your ability to function at your highest level. The autonomic nervous system, which governs automatic bodily processes like heart rate, digestion, and hormone release, has two primary branches. the sympathetic nervous system, which mobilizes energy for action, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which allows for rest, recovery, and repair. When you're in a state of over-friendliness, constantly reading the room, adjusting your tone, suppressing your needs, smiling when you don't feel like it, or trying to be liked, you are unconsciously activating the sympathetic branch. This is the same system that engages when you're under threat. Your body doesn't distinguish between social stress and physical danger. It simply responds to the signal that says, you must perform to stay safe. This continuous activation leads to an increase in cortisol, a stress hormone that plays a vital role in short-term alertness and energy mobilization. But when cortisol remains elevated over time, it starts to impair immune function, reduce sleep quality, decrease emotional regulation, and blunt motivation. This is why individuals who are always socially on, those who can't say no, who feel guilty resting, who feel responsible for everyone's comfort, often feel exhausted, overwhelmed, or disconnected from themselves. They are living in a state of chronic sympathetic overdrive, which may be masked by a smile or a kind tone, but internally, it is a system under duress. Protecting your energy, therefore, is not a luxury. It's a biological requirement for maintaining physical health, cognitive clarity, and long-term psychological resilience. When you allow yourself to pause, say no, set boundaries, and not explain or justify every decision, you give your nervous system a chance to shift into parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest mode. This state is marked by slower breathing, lower heart rate, deeper sleep, better digestion, and enhanced immune repair. It's also the state that supports creativity, intuition, and connection to self. One reason people struggle with this shift is that their brain has associated social harmony with safety, and any disruption to that, such as not responding to a message immediately, not offering help when someone expects it, or setting firm boundaries, triggers a mild internal alarm. The amygdala, the brain's emotional threat detector, becomes activated, producing a sense of guilt, shame, or anxiety. But this response is often based on outdated conditioning, not present moment truth. When you repeatedly override this alarm and remain grounded in your boundaries, you begin to rewire the emotional response system, teaching the brain that it's safe to rest, safe to disconnect, safe to protect your energy without danger. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and light exposure all influence this system. But so does your social behavior. Every yes that goes against your values becomes a micro-stressor. Every moment of forced friendliness increases energetic leakage. Over time, this reduces your baseline capacity to focus, to feel deeply, and to engage meaningfully. That's why managing your energy is not selfish, it's a neurological imperative for living effectively and intentionally. The insula, a region responsible for monitoring internal bodily states, plays a crucial role in this process. When you practice checking in with your body, asking what feels draining, what feels nourishing, you strengthen this area and improve your capacity for interoception, or internal awareness. This allows you to make better decisions that are in alignment with your biological